Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's WOW session. Thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you here. Today is a webinar format, and we are going to have some rules of the road. My name is Erin Miley. I am a business manager here at AIM. If you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. I am happy to assist you. With that, you can hear and see us, but we cannot hear or see you. But we want to hear from you today. We have some interactions. I know our presenter is going to ask some questions. So the way to interact with us today is through the chat. You will locate that at the bottom of your screen. It says chat. If you do not readily see that, you should see a more option with a circle and three dots. Click on that and the chat option should appear there. We will also have some polls, so be ready to answer those poll questions. If you haven't had enough caffeine yet today, get started drinking that. I have mine right here ready to go because this is going to be an interesting conversation today and I cannot wait to get started. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. Hello, Chris. Thank you for starting the chat. I appreciate that. Hello from sunny Orlando. I'm jealous. We have some weird weather here in St. Louis, so I'm jealous of the Orlando weather. With that, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to introduce you to Tracey Wik. She is a fantastic partner at AIM. She is one of our senior trainer and consultants here. We rely on her very heavily. She's constantly traveling and going out to our members to do a lot of work with them in their organizations around a lot of various topics, and one of which she's going to impart with us today. I'm really excited to hear about it. Tracey, take it away.
Thanks, Erin. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. I know we're all happy on the Fridays, yes. So I'm thrilled to be here. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I would like to say has so much sizzle, right, in the marketplace right now. You can't really move anywhere without hearing some aspect about AI. And the topic we're calling it the AI adoption puzzle. Busy with AI, but not better because of it. So, the first thing I'd like to say is that my passion, for those of you that I've worked with, is really about, and you'll see the logo. My business is Love Sunday Nights. So I'm on a mission to have everyone love Sunday nights. And the reason I start with that is that what I find is that research about it is there's a lot of reasons why people don't love, they have the Sunday scaries. They don't like love the idea of going to work. But so much of it has to do with whether they're prepared for what's coming at them. And I think that the problem with AI right now, which we're going to unpack today in our time, is how can you individually and as an organization be better prepared for what is happening in the AI space, because there are ways of doing it that will definitely empower you to have a much better adoption of the tools. So with that, as Erin said, we are going to have a poll. So let's get started right away. I want to hear from you all. Okay. Which best describes how you use AI tools? And you only get one choice. Okay. So here you go. You got to choose.
And I'm gonna voice my vote. I
Yes.
literally one of the second tabs on my browser I open every single morning.
Okay.
Chat GPT, second browser
Yeah.
I open every
There
morning.
you go.
All right. Got a lot of people answering. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds and then we're going to launch the results of this poll. Three, two, one. All right. Ending poll. Sharing results.
Yep.
Daily. Looks like
Okay, here we go. I use them regularly, so about 41% of you, yep. I use them occasionally, so it's kind of split there, right? So there's the daily users and then specific. I tried them, but I haven't integrated them yet. It's about 10%, and I haven't really started. And then, okay, so let's just shout out. There's no one avoiding it, though. Okay, so that's good, because sometimes when we talk about it, some people are avoiding it. All right. So what's interesting about that, I'll just say before we launch to the next one, is this has changed dramatically in the last year. So when I did a version of this content about a year ago, it wasn't the case. It would probably much less of people using it on a daily basis. And then suddenly it was like literally overnight. People were just like, Erin, chat is my friend. Chat is my number two. I open up, my email and then there's chat, okay? Or Claude, whichever one you prefer. All right, now let's see the real reason we're here today. Okay, are you actually better because of it? Okay, so let's hear. Are you busy with it or are you actually monetizing, optimizing, all those buzzwords, right? Let's hear.
I would say I'm better.
I would say I'm definitely better. Okay. I love creating custom content for people, and I think that, and I also write. And so for me, having just to your point, the tools have really just been a game changer for me in terms of my productivity.
Yeah, it helps me word my emails a little softer.
Yes.
My
Well,
emails could have been
that's another use. Yes, that's another use.
my
Okay.
emails are used to be so blunt.
You are the blunt instrument email person that I talk about in my classes, Erin. Okay, there we go.
All right, ending poll, three,
All
two,
right.
one. Sharing results. Looks like definitely better.
Okay.
Looks like somewhat better. Thankfully, not
About the
anything at
same.
all is zero. So,
Okay.
all right.
Definitely better, somewhat better. Okay, so that's good too because it's an overwhelming, percentage. Okay, very good. Well, wherever you are, it's perfect because it's where you are, right? And you have to start with where you are in order to move to the next place. And the thing about AI that I think I have found, and I think this is true, it's not just personal to me, is you really have to get to a place of comfort. It's unlike other content, which is it's impossible, I find, and this is again research to stay ahead of any of it because the tools are just evolving so quickly and how fast. And so what you really want to be able to do is think about it as a place to stand in terms of how you implement this material. So with that, let's delve right into the next one. So everyone is using AI. I think our pool is probably similar to most organizations, and it used to be, like I said, about maybe 18 months ago, in particular, particularly bigger corporations, they had more of the guardrails up, and then everybody started to implement their own Gemini or Copilot within their Microsoft suite. And so AI usage is exploding. And there is a pressure that everyone feels, and I think you probably feel it too, to do something, to show that there's an access that you have to the tools. And so there's a lot of tools being deployed, licenses being purchased. But if you actually start to look at the research, what is happening is that the work hasn't fundamentally changed in many regards. So we'll speak to a little bit about that, in a second here. But and this is, by the way, not just my personal opinion. Across the board, whatever studies you're looking at, they are talking about the rush of the AI implementation, but there's not the meaningful performance that they were hoping from, I guess what I would say, the promise of the tool. And so what a lot of times is happening too is employees are experimenting, whether they're experimenting, sometimes what I've heard, and maybe this is you, we won't tell your boss. Some people are actually using their own personal instances of Chat or Claude or Copilot, right? But they're not, experimenting with different things, but they're not necessarily transforming how their flow of work from a day to day. So we're really not perceiving the value in the way that it is intended. So I looked at a number of different researches. So there research studies. So there's McKinsey, the big thought leaders. There's BCG, which we're going to talk about the BCG work here. McLean, again, across the board. There's just not uh, the impact that I think people were hoping for. So somewhere around 80 to 90% of employees are stuck in moderate or basic usage. So again, even if you have Copilot and you're able to use it now at work, you're still only getting the basic usage out of it. And this one is the one I think, particularly for those of us in the learning space, 10%, a little less than 10% are collaborating in meaningful ways. And so there's a lot about how companies are rolling out AI and they, again, deploy the tools, but they're not necessarily thinking about it in a way that optimizes the value. So let's take a time out. Why is that? Well, not everyone adopts AI in the same way. And this is a really important point. Some people, and I have some of these people in my classes, are in denial about it, right? They just think if, okay, if I don't think about it, it's not coming for me. Or they may say, well, I have a job where I know I'm on in a production plant. There's no way that AI is coming for me in that. Probably true, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have a point of view, at least understand what the tools. Then there's the resisting piece, and this manifests in many different behaviors, which we're going to unpack. It's not just simply that I think sometimes a misunderstanding that people who are resisting are not technically savvy, when in fact, when you start to look at this, that's in some cases the opposite. Then there's the people on the other side of the spectrum, and I would probably say that, my best friend from grad school would be on this side, where they're so overly excited or enthusiastic about it that they're just kind of blind to some of the unintended consequences. When ChatGPT in 2022 first kind of came into the marketplace, my best friend called me and said, literally, she said, "This is the best day for humanity," when she was talking about ChatGPT. And it was October of 2022. And she explained to me why. And she's kind of been this like passionate person about it. But then when you kind of have her take a step back and say, okay, well, can we talk about like really the implementation? She's not as excited about that. She's much more excited about what the capabilities are. So again, this whole continuum goes across the spectrum of how people adopt. And you really have to think about this when you think about those statistics of where the value is coming from. So, Erin, let me just check in with you. I can't really see the chat. Is there any questions, or let's just engage some folks? Any questions about what we're talking about so far?
Not any questions, but Chris made the comment that there's a cohort of people, especially younger generations, actively pushing back on the AI rollout. And I come here to comment. That's super interesting to me because you would think that they would be the early adopters, they'd be the exciting generation for it. Chris said, all in the last month, Newsweek, Fortune, New York Times published that. You would think that they would be the adopters. They would be the excited ones to do it, the implementers, the but I can see that. I can see it because anybody who's been on Wow sessions with me, I am a TikTok addict. I scroll through it hours at a time in the evenings. And I see it. It's AI fatigue. I can see them saying, hey, I don't want to be the ones that maybe the older generations rely on to train them and show them how to do things. I don't want to be the one that they go to and automatically assume knows everything. I don't want to be the one that I don't want to use AI. I don't like AI. I don't want to be the one that realizes I can see the complaints that they kind of bring up through the social
Yes.
media. So I can kind of get it, but also it is a little bit surprising to me on the other side where you would think the generalization of that generation would want it. So,
Yes.
and I love my
I'm
AI. So
I'm
like,
so happy that Chris put that in the chat, because that's exactly where we're going. What's really interesting about the AI, kind of again, that spectrum of where people are in terms of their adoption, is that unlike other demographical information, and there's a lot, as we know, about the generations in the workplace, technology, and particularly AI tools, it doesn't necessarily skew that way. Okay. In some cases, but I'll talk about my daughter. She's 17. She's anti AI, period. Okay. And not because of what you're talking about, Erin. It's fascinating. She's anti more from an environmental and more of a political point of view. Okay. And how she's not really interested in using the tools. She wants to go old school. She doesn't even like social media. So the reason this is important is that if you come from a particular, and this is the key here, unexamined place, right? Both on your side as somebody looking to use the tools or as somebody deploying them, you really miss a lot of the opportunity. And what happens is people either revert to their current habits. The folks on TikTok that you're following, they're not going to help. They're just like, no, I don't want to be the one to go to. Their defenses go up. There's a domination. I know for sure. My daughter is really funny because my husband is kind of like, probably like you and like my bestie. He's like he's like, I don't know if people saw the South Park episode, but Randy's talking to his like, his AI tool, his chat. My husband's kind of like that. He walks around, he's like, can you please calculate? He's putting up a fence, and can you calculate the square footage and how much lumber. And my daughter's always giving him a hard time about it. Like, can't you just do it mathematically? Well, he can, but he's like, why would I? Right. And so it's really important to understand because if you don't, people are definitely stuck, whether it's happiness or not, about the feelings that inform their actions.
Mhm.
Okay, so with that, it is not a technology problem. That's the big idea here, right? The tools are great. Even if you're not, my daughter would say this, even if she's not a great, like she doesn't like want to use chat or Claude, she still thinks it's awesome, right? In terms of what it's capable of doing. And so most of the deployment of the strategies, and this is probably true for a lot of you, are around the tool itself. What are we trying to roll out? And then the training's designed very much in, feature function, how do you use the tool? And then accessibility. Who has accessibility? What are the game's rules of, the game that we're playing in terms of the rules of engagement around the access? What can you do? What can you not do? And all of that is very important. I'm not saying that it isn't, but like most aspects of, I think, the workplace where we're not getting the type of, collaboration or return on our investments, it is not a technology problem. It is very much a human problem. So I've created this AI adoption journey, which is a basic understanding of how to think through um, the flow, which is your tool. And you really have to think through the tool, whether you're wanting content to be created, emails, research. Again, they're different. Is this a summarizing? Is this an automation or task of workflow? And what's happened now is when AI first came out, there was a lot about the automation. And now there's much more about all this other aspect of the creative side of AI with the content as well as researching. And so we're going to speak to the personas. I'm going to talk about how you really have to understand what is the persona that the person has or your population. What's the majority? Where do they stand in terms of their perceptions? And then once you understand the tool that you're trying to roll out, what is the purpose? Then you can design from the personas the change process, the work redesign, and then that's where you're going to get the impact. So we'll come back to this in a minute, but I wanted to just kind of introduce this. This is a really great visual for people to have. And the big thing behind here is you really have to stay centered. Again, there's just so much information coming at you. What is it that humans should own, and where is that intersection with the AI? That's the key. All right, let's check in with the chat. Are there any questions or any comments? Again, I'm not looking, so help me here, Erin.
Um, so Temple did bring up a good, as it's just good conversation around the whole behavior kind of situation.
Yep.
But she did bring up a good question. Could part of it be that they haven't seen work pre-technology like older generations? We see the benefits and the impact over the years, which is why
Yes.
they're kind of, maybe a little not understanding.
Yes. I think that that's a great point, is that and it would be up to you as the person within the organization, or you, the team, right, to really help them understand the before and after, right, of what AI makes possible. And that is really key.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. So now you saw the AI adoption journey. I talked about personas. So let me kind of delve into this. So this comes from a BCG. I put this up that is talks about that there's actually 5 personas. So again, everyone adopts AI differently, and that they've identified that there's 5 distinct personas in terms of people's perceptions. So there's the AI champion. So and part of the reason I tell stories is because it makes them come alive. So my best friend from grad school, she would be the AI champion. Anything about AI, NVIDIA has great earnings. It's a chip. It's not, she's excited. She's calling me how exciting that is. Anything at all related to AI, they're just super enthusiastic. Yes. Then there's the independent explorers. I don't know, Aaron, but you and I are probably in that category where you and I are probably out in front. I know Phil's been really big on talking about AI. I know I've really appreciated that, but the independent explorer where you're kind of out, pursuing your own TikTok or whatever it is, and what they're telling you, and then AI tools, yes, chat's your friend. Then there's the organizational adopter, and we're going to unpack what, the characteristics of each of these. Then there's the passive observer, kind of people on the sidelines saying, I'm not so sure about this. And then the cautious skeptic. And so I took this, I'm actually doing some work with some folks at the University of Pennsylvania who have designed their own personas for the content. They both work at the medical school. They're instructional designers, and I've been working with them, but they've created their own personas for specifically for the University of Pennsylvania for the content that they're creating for the med school. So you can do that, right? And we can talk about that if anybody wants to, reach out. But you don't really need to because you can use these basic 5 personas because they kind of capture, I think, where most people are. So let's unpack kind of how to think through the personas. So number one, AI champion. This is so much better. Okay, so I've kind of tried to capture what are some of the things that you would hear these people say. So again, my bestie, everything about AI is better than not. Okay. And so then you really want to think about what are some of the motivations that they have, and then what are some of the frustrations that are driving them to be an early adopter. So they're curious, they get energy from experimenting, and the key here is breaking things, right? Their frustration, which is for sure, again, my bestie, she hates any type of inefficiency or a bad process. Like she just, it just makes her pull her hair out. And there's also this fear of slowing down, right? She's not interested in that. And definitely a fear of missing out. So they're very much focused on the future and they're very much focused on the platform itself, okay? Meaning whatever the tool is. And then there's a risk that they move too fast. They're out in front, which is certainly true of people that I know in this category. They're out way, too far. And oftentimes, too, there's a superficial use of tools, and then they move to the next one, and they move to the next one, and they move to the next one, and they move to the next one. And again, not a problem. You just have to kind of understand some of the motivations and the frustrations and what I say the unintended consequences of their actions. So you probably have people inside your organization who are in this category. They're AI champions. Now, I just put over here, this doesn't mean these little, the number, or not the numbers, but the dots next to Claude or Canva, they don't mean anything in terms of like, the percentage or anything like that. What I tried to do was give you a framework of how to think through each of the personas and what are some of the tools that they would use. So I kind of just put this here and you'll see it kind of flow through to each of them. So this is the AI champion. Now we're going to move to number 2, the independent explorer. So this is me, okay? Make my life easier, right? So I'm not afraid to experiment, but I really don't want to just experiment for the sake of it. I want my life to be easier. So we also want to reduce friction and have autonomy. Fear of wasting time, especially as somebody who is constantly on the road and having to, proof content and create content and do different things. I really just don't have a lot of time to waste. And I don't want to keep doing things the hard way. So we do have some commonalities with, the AI champions in terms of the friction. Now, this I think is true for me, and I don't know about you, Aaron, because I can definitely speak for myself. There is the risk for, our persona of fragmentation. I feel sometimes like I'm a little Claude today, then I'm chat, then I'm over here, and then, oh, somebody told me about I need to do Notebook LM, so then I start to get into Notebook LM. And then everything gets kind of fragmented, and I don't really optimize what I'm looking to optimize if I were to stick with one installation. And then the bigger issue that we've seen inside of organizations is these are the shadow people, right? These are the people that run their own processes on their home computers and kind of violate, like they're not violating, corporate policies, but they're running the shadow processes and programs. So you probably have these people in your organization as well. Okay, the organizational adopter. Tell me what good looks like. Well, they have a need for a roadmap. They have risk management tendencies. Like they're not necessarily a yes, they're not necessarily a no. They just need to see the value. They do have a fear of getting into trouble, meaning they don't want to violate something. So you really have to give them clear expectations. And the biggest thing is, how does this fit into our system? So part of where I see, by the way, if you were to poll, which is what I would like encourage you to do with these, you could put these in a survey monkey and just kind of ask a few questions about people in your organization. There's probably more people in the organizational adopter category typically than others. Okay. And so if you can really think about this, that's where you can unlock a lot of the implementation roadblocks, is to really understand, how does this fit into our current system, and how can I help people see the value of playing by this particular rule, whatever the rule might be. Okay, here's the passive observer. I'll jump in when I see how it helps me with my job. Again, probably a huge number of folks in this category. They may use, here's what's kind of fascinating about this that I've noticed. They may be a passive observer at work. Okay, I'll just give you an example of something that happened last week with one of my clients. He's not really using the tools that are available to him at work because he feels overwhelmed. He's got too much coming at him. When will he find the time to learn it? And so there's this tendency sometimes to think, oh, they don't really believe in the tools, or they're just kind of behind, when in fact at home he's got his whole house automated with AI. It's much more about how is it that it would relate to his role. So this is again a key thing to keep in mind as you're implementing. And then the last one is probably my favorite one. And this kind of speaks to, I think, one of the questions Chris asked earlier, or comments, is what are we exposing ourselves to? The cautious skeptics. Now, here's what's interesting about them. They're very concerned about accuracy, ethics. Am I taking, an intellectual property violation here for granted when I'm creating this content? Is this legit? And the issue here is there's, again, unlike in the past where we might have had a kind of a viewpoint about demographics that, it doesn't really hold up here. A lot of times people in the cautious skeptic category actually know the tools better than the other categories. They've actually done the research to understand what is happening with this particular installation of Claude or whichever, right? And then they have issues about how it's being implemented, or different aspects of the safety, or the GDPR compliance, or whatever it is. And they've actually done the research. So it would be a mistake to think that the cautious skeptics are just being negative because they're not clear about the technology, or they don't want to use it. No, in fact, they actually do know, and that they are very much concerned about the ethical standards of what are we being exposed to, both individually, but also as an organization. And so this is a growing group of people. And so I would categorize my daughter, okay, in this group. It's not that she doesn't understand. She's just very concerned about what we are exposing ourselves to, both from an individual point, but also as a societal perspective with AI. All right, let me just stop because that's a lot. So let me just check in and see questions or comments about all that. I'll just give a second here.
Um, Jenny just said our largest implementation constraint is the per seat subscription cost to ensure privacy. So as we have these conversations, I think, yeah, if we want to be addressing the concerns of our cautious skeptics, our maybe later adopters, it is going to be, yes, we have to consider our costs to protect our organizations and things like that. So we just did a business rollout for ChatGPT. We just purchased that as an organization because we've been rolling with our owns here.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though we have Amy Hart, which is closed, but I think it's interesting to see the adoption of organizations and how they're trying to some are more cautious, some are more go, go, go.
Yes.
Um, it's interesting. It's interesting. There's no questions yet, but I think I just had an aha moment. I'm going to tell you my aha moment now because I know you're going to ask it at the end, but I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
my aha moment. the cautious skeptic. I didn't think about it that way because you always think about it, oh, those are conspiracy theorists. Those are your,
Yes.
people that you always hear about saying, no, 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 it's the government oversight. They want to big brother you, blah, blah, blah. I didn't think about it that way with the whole, they actually know way more. It's those people that are more educated on how the actual technology works. I didn't think about it that way. That was an aha.
And it was an aha moment for me when I started looking into these personas because, and that's why I became so passionate about it, is that it isn't that they're Luddites, okay, to use it, like a fun little word, right? But some people say, oh, I'm not a Luddite. They're not. They're actually very aware. And so they are the people that are very much concerned about what are we exposing ourselves to? And have we kind of thought through the implications of the rollout so that we've included the rules of engagement, the impact, the accuracy, the ethical standards. And so it is a mistake to kind of think about them as one broad brush of just people that are, to your point, the conspiracy theory people or people that just don't want to use technology, because that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to keep going. Now, it's really important that once you understand these different personas, and by the way, Aaron brought up a really great point. Wherever you are as an organization, and every organization is different, and there are very much practical considerations about this. I do know that. Licensing, time in terms of, people's time and attention, all of those things. And regardless of where you are as an organization and what tools you're rolling out, all of this is true, by the way. You have all of those different personas in your organization across the spectrum. So you can use this content to just kind of think through, where are people? How do I understand, my population? And they may definitely skew in terms of functions, but again, using this content can kind of go across all of the different organizations, whatever your philosophical or budgetary commitments are to AI. So with that, then, once you have the understanding of your people, the personas, then it becomes a change management issue. So you can use, AIM. I mean, I teach it with AIM. We have change management classes. You probably have change management frameworks. But really the key about it that I think is the magic of it is that if you take, and I just took kind of basic change questions and put this here, what do you need to change? What are your key objectives? So be clear about that, because I can tell you that when I talk to people, what is the point of having chat on, you're doing this rollout of Copilot, or you're doing this rollout of chat company wide. What's the objective? What is it? And it needs to not just be one objective in terms of kind of the overall goal. You really need to kind of think through it functionally. Yes. And the biggest thing that I think will give you, which, as you hear this, it could sound like a lot of work, but it actually isn't, which is, what will the benefits of this change be to the organization? So you really have to think about it from all five of the personas' needs. And all you can do if it is simply is just think about the questions that they would ask. Why would the champion care? What would be the benefit to the champion? Well, faster, friction. What would the benefit be to the cautious skeptic? Well, we would have a consistent ethical approach to something. Again, identifying what the benefit is based on the personas. And then how will this impact people positively? The more you can think about it at the individual role level, it's really key. So this, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be each and every employee. It could be identified by the different factions within the organization and what those roles are. That's a good place to stand. And most importantly, which is often overlooked, even though there's so much research about this, but people talk about it, but they don't actually think about it when they're implementing, is what should the humans own, and get the agreement on what the humans should own versus what the AI should own. Now that sounds really simple, but it's not. Okay. So now Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, has been talking about, there's a lot of case studies. If you get a chance, you can take, kind of research this. The future is not about AI versus humans, but about AI and humans working together. Okay. And so there's a lot about, some of the work that they've implemented at Microsoft. So if we're talking about the human AI interaction, what I think is important, and I just took a work design value chain of just, basically a production and kind of some of the factions that would go into a production. You really need to have everyone in the room at the same time understanding what the work design value chain is about whatever that particular flow of the implementation is for AI. And typically, I don't see people do this. Okay. You don't usually bring in cross-functional teams. I know it sounds silly, but it doesn't happen very much. You get an implementation of something, and then it's the IT folks are rolling it out, or and then they have all the finance people, or they have all the HR people, or they have all the sales people, or they have the customer-facing people, and they do the rollout based on function. But you really have to think through the design of the value chain simply ahead of time before you're actually implementing the tool. And just by getting people in the room and seeing where these intersections happen and asking the question, what should the humans own? Again, very simply, you really can answer the question. And I love this kind of framework as a cheat sheet, which is you can use the what can you control, what can you influence, and what are you concerned about? Okay, kind of this is like again, in some change management models, we talk about the different control, influence, or concern. So just by having the same conversation across the value chain and asking human versus AI, control, influence, or concern, you can have a shared agreement, which is really important because then it gives you, at the beginning, when I was talking about the optimization component and how we're not seeing the value, it's because typically what happens is that people roll out AI, but they don't actually take the time to think through this conversation. And so they're putting the tool on top of the current workflow, but they're not necessarily thinking about what would have to change, what would we have to influence about the work design. And if you look at any of the research studies, that's what they tell you is the biggest missing. And so don't do that. Think just through very simply, even just answering these questions, you will understand where the control, the influence, and the concerns are, and understand that most of the time it's the humans that need to control this, not the AI tool, right? Okay, let me just stop. I see there's a few more. I see 13 now. So is there more questions or comments, Aaron?
It was just when you got to the change management, I was just reminding people that last month we had a wow session on change management. So if they
Ah,
need a reference point to just kind of get them started on the conversation, they can refer back to our YouTube channel for the recording. See what we did
okay.
there? I love a good tie-in. Oh, well, we did have something just pop up. I think the caution goes way deeper. Rob is commenting, I think the caution goes way deeper than just business. Our kids are 100% correct. I use AI daily, but I fully expect this downward spiral our society is already in to spin faster. Critical thinking goes out the window. Education and learning goes out the window. There isn't a trial and error in learning from mistakes, etc. It's actually a terrifying tool that I'm kind of addicted to, which is likely what the creators wanted. Is come too fast with too little accountability, super conflicted. And then we had another comment come in. My leadership's main concern is an employee inadvertently sharing confidential information that ends up out in the universe for anyone to find. I mean, Jill, your comment, that's more of a training of
Yes.
responsibility use for AI, which, hey, little teaser, come this summer, AIM ha will have something that will be part of your compliance series for AIM University. That's your teaser. So look for that this summer. But that's more of a training on responsible use of AI. That can be hopefully remedied. You can't always use it as a fail-safe, but that you can train your employees in. Um, but I think Rob's spot on. I don't know. I'm addicted. I go, I'm named my AI. Chad is Alex. Co-pilot's Vex. They're brothers. I play them off of each other because I want a response. I want to see what responses I get.
Yep.
Um, if I get, I can't rename Claude, but I use Claude too, but he already has a name, so I feel bad renaming him. But I interact with them. I argue with them. I use them daily.
Yes. So
Um,
let's ask Rob. Rob, would you call yourself? It's a really fascinating conversation. Would you call yourself a cautious skeptic?
While he's typing, Rob said absolutely. Yes.
See? So what's interesting, so this kind of is, let's go back up to that, okay? That's a brilliant illustration, right, of what we were talking about, where in the past you would have thought, okay, the cautious skeptics are the conspiracy theory people who are not using it, right? They're just no way. Except he said he's addicted. Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, right? He's
Yes.
addicted. So it's not like he doesn't understand, right? In
Yes.
fact, he understands so much that he's addicted, yet he's cautiously skeptic. He's a little like, oh my gosh, what was some of the statements? The demise of humanity as we know it, or something like that. Yeah.
Yes. Too little accountability. It's come too fast, too little accountability. Critical thinking starts to go out the window. Um, and then Chris mentioned, the pace of AI change is happening so very quickly. He feels that is driving the turnoff for some. And I will say, so Chris, that's an interesting comment because if you've watched the news recently, you see all these mass layoffs because companies are incorporating AI into the technology.
Yes.
So it's kind of taking the roles of individuals because they don't need those. Um, but you're starting to see now that in by 2030 they're going to need to rehire those roles again because
Correct.
they've made it oops. They realize they rolled out AI too quickly and they didn't really observe what they actually truly needed from the roles and how they were using the AI. They were too quick to adopt it and they didn't understand what it did. And so now they're going to need to rehire those roles by 2030. So I agree, Chris. It's AI is great when thought through and intentional and adopted in an appropriate way within the organization. But it's changing so quickly. It's it's kind of become oversaturated.
Yes.
You get
Well, that's
tired.
And that's the whole point of why I kind of distilled these slides, which is I would assert that and I've seen the same research as you, Aaron. That's where I was going to go. I mean, it's across the board. 85 to 90% of the implementations are failing to deliver the ROI that people are looking for. And it depends on what research study you're quoting. I mean, it could be a little higher, it could be a little lower, but it's not this overwhelmingly woohoo, we've implemented AI and now we don't need all these rules and wow, it's so amazing. It's not. It's actually the opposite. They're finding that, to your point, they did an oops. And so when I was thinking through the workflow and thinking like kind of reading a lot about what Microsoft has done and some other people that have really stayed true to the human element, it's really that they didn't answer that question, right? What should the humans own? Where do the humans interface across this value chain of the work design? And they just implemented the tool thinking the tool was going to fix it, and it doesn't. It does not.
Yeah, when I started using AI, I specifically just strictly used chat. I made sure I understood it, and I followed a couple of content creators that were developers within the platform of chat. They knew it, the ins and outs. AI in the Room is one of the TikTok creators I followed. She did a beautiful job of explaining how to give it a character, how to prompt it. I followed her, I followed a couple of others, and I made sure I understood it so that I was comfortable with it before I explored Copilot and Claude and other things like even though Phil and Lauren and everybody here was like, yeah, yeah, AI, I'm like, I want to make sure I'm just using chat right now. Thank you. And then
Yes.
fun little fact, AimTrack does have AI built into it. That's our applicant tracking system. They launched it 2 years ago before I brought it to our members last summer. So I'm
Hmm.
like, I was very cautious when I brought it to our members because I wanted to make sure it was well thought out, intentional, worked, and I understood how it worked. Because I'm not
Yes.
bringing AI to the masses before it actually works. So it does need to be intentional and thought out. So, yeah.
Yes. Very much so. All right, let's keep moving here. All right, so to that point, again, I tried to make something just tangible, like I always do, which is what is one thing you could do different as a result of listening to this content. So I talk about the four essential P's, okay? Preferences, personas, playbooks, and practice. And I would say part of the reason I love working with AIM is I think AIM is very intentional about what they roll out. And I do think they consider these concepts in terms of how it all comes together. So if you come from the place, again, whatever the tool is, it doesn't matter. It could be a creative application, it could be an automation tool, it could be exactly kind of what Aaron's talking about with the applicant tracking system. It doesn't really matter what the tool is. What is important is you need to think through the preferences. People don't resist change, they resist change delivered in a way that doesn't work for them. So you have to really come from, and don't overstep this. And so I'm really big on using assessments about people's preferences. And you can use assessments across the board for lots of different things, but really understand people's preferences about how they approach change and what is the resistance really. Because we heard it with Rob. It's not that he's not clear on what the tools do. It's that he has resistance, he has some concerns about it. So let's really understand what those preferences are. Then use the concept of personas. And again, you can develop your own, or use some of the conventional, like this BCG model, which is map your employees' change preferences with their AI personas. So it's how people approach change in general. And then there's the layer of how they think about AI, because they're not exactly the same. And then what I think is a really important component is creating a playbook addressing each point of view for each AI persona. So what typically happens with a lot of training, as we talked about earlier, and that's important, is it's a technical feature function kind of training. But really, when you're talking about the playbooks, put it into the concept of what would each of those AI personas need to understand and be comfortable with, so that the passive observer is not still passive and is not on the sideline. And the independent explorer is not out running shadow installations, that they see the value in their flow of work. And it's not that much more work. In fact, it's way more work if you just take it from one point of view and roll it all out. You really need to address what are the concerns of each of these personas and how can we make sure that that value chain is clear to them. And then the most important, which I think Aaron just gave a brilliant illustration of, is you really want the practice in the flow of work. So before the applicant tracking system was rolled out, there was a whole flow of work concept that she was working on to make sure she understood that practice before she deployed it more broadly. And it's really important because I think there's so much enthusiasm and I feel like there's so much pressure. I think the difference now that I see versus a couple of years ago is how much pressure everyone feels, both individually as well as organizationally, to implement these tools without really thinking through all of this. And I think it really can create kind of a mayhem, really, if you're not really clear about where is this in the flow of work and what is the impact. And again, the biggest issue is, where are the humans essential? And do not overstep that, because if you just think that the AI tool alone is going to, kind of the answer to everything that we need, it isn't. And I know that sounds really simple, but I think we all have experienced where people haven't taken the time to slow down to really speed up. Okay, I think we're a little ahead of the game here, but I just kind of curious, like, let's open it up and see what surprised people. What's one thing that they'll do as a result of this session? That's my biggest question I always ask.
Well, we know my aha moment. I already gave my aha moment with
Yep.
the cat, but there's been some really good insight in this chat right now. Um, I I have appreciated the openness that everybody has displayed. Jennifer made the comment about the amount of options available is also so overwhelming. When you hear
Yes.
from others, the platforms they are using and tasks accomplished, it can make you feel like you need to use multiple platforms for specific tasks. So I like the idea of sticking with a few platforms so they learn your style. That is key because AI is learning from you. And once it learns your style, it gets the flow, it can
Yep.
anticipate what you're looking for. Um, it is amazing once it starts to learn what you want.
Yes,
Because
I
mine's
agree
trained
with
to
that.
even give color codes. Like I can give a full on, hey, design this presentation, and it'll say, do you want it branded? And I'll be like, yeah. And it'll give me a full branded presentation, and I don't have to do anything. It's amazing. Krista
Yes.
said, definitely we'll be doing an internal poll to understand the personas within our organization as we talk about rolling consistent AI out. That's a good idea, Krista. Absolutely. Anybody have any aha moment? Like anybody surprised by anything? I feel like again, I was really surprised by that cautious skeptic.
Yep.
That one, I didn't think about it that way. That is a good point to make, though. Although I love Rob, how he's like, I feel guilty using it, but dang, it's cool. Rob, it's always going to be cool to use AI when you can see how its capabilities. I appreciate it. I
I mean, it is one of those things where it really and I think the thing that's really probably other people experience too is how, to your point, once it learns, you're right, you have this real personal you have this personal relationship with your AI, right? And you give them names, they're brothers, right? And then you interact with them and then you debate with them, and there's something that's really I'd say magical. And then at some point, I kind of do understand Rob, though. You're sitting there and you're thinking, wow, this is amazing. And then you think, but is it? Okay. You like, there is this internal, like, okay, maybe it's not. Or I like take a step back. So it's definitely what I tried to do in this session is really turn down the noise, I think, and just have, again, give people a place to stand. What's your preferences? Where are the personas in your organization? How do you understand how they interact in terms of the human and the AI component? And then are you practicing in the flow work? Just really simple concepts that you can apply repeatedly, whatever the installation is. Because if you kind of use these practices, I do think it does do a lot better than if you're just kind of out there not being intentional. So that's kind of what, where I was having spent a lot of time thinking about this, like what would be the most valuable?
Yeah, so and then Temple mentioned one of her takeaways is to have the training. It is really key. You should have some kind of training if you can, especially if you are having this deployed within your organization. Training is key around responsible
Yeah.
use. Jenny, does AIM have a generic AI use policy we can modify for our? We absolutely do. We absolutely do. So feel free to reach out to myself or the solutions team. We can absolutely get that over to you for the generic use policy. Um, for orgs which are just now rolling out AI after subscribing to a platform, does AIM have a training? Um, are Chris, for the training, are you referring to like our responsible use training? If so, we're going to be rolling out that like a part of the compliance series in AIM University. Like I mentioned, I teased it. We'll be probably rolling that out this summer. If you want something more specific to your organization, we can talk about that. But we'll be rolling that out this summer. So you have options, but yes, the answer is yes. But either this summer or you'll have another option available. Um, I think that was all the questions that came through. Any other thoughts that we want to share and impart?
I do not. Please reach out if anyone
Yeah,
wants some information about how to use the personas. I would say, in addition to the training that Aaron's talking about, understanding the personas of your organization is really critical in terms of, because there's some organizations that have a lot more cautious skeptics than you think, or passive observers. And the key, like any change model, is to move people through, whether you're talking the neutral zone or if you're talking about getting people from the present to the future as quickly as possible. And the way to do that is to address their core motivations and their frustrations.
absolutely. It's definitely understanding the makeup of your organization as a whole on where their mindset is on the use of this and how they're interacting with it. And definitely reach out we can bring Tracey in into your organizations. She is always a big proponent and a great coach, great consultant, great trainer. This is her bailiwick. She loves doing this within organizations and helping out. So contact us. We can definitely get her in the door for you. And thank you so much for joining us this month. For those of you who regularly attend our WOW sessions, next month we're going to have a little bit of an adjustment, just so y'all are aware. Tanya Zion will be our presenter next month, but Tanya's so popular, we're going to have a little bit of a time change. It'll be at 9:30 to 10:30 on the third Friday of next month, just to accommodate our presenter schedule for her. So just kind of be prepared for a little bit of a later schedule start for next month's session. But look for those invites to go out here shortly, and we will see you all next time. Thank you so much for your time, Tracy. We really appreciated you joining us and giving us all this great topic information. And everyone, thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.